Welcome, everybody, to the Oceanside Chat speaker series for the Viterbi Startup Garage. We've had a little bit of time today because we were working on our Summer Smasher program, which has its own series to support students at USC. But now we're back. The grown-up Oceanside Chat series for startups, for people who are wanting to become entrepreneurs, for students who are interested, for researchers who are interested. It's really kind of a big community of people. And I'm super pleased to have Benjamin kick off the series for the end of the year. Benjamin's been with the Garage for quite some time. He's done 2 presentations before this one, and I will definitely share those with you all in my follow-up email. But just to give you a little bit of understanding of Benjamin and his background and why we love him so much. He's an expert in helping early stage companies define and refine their brands to maximize their growth and business value. He's been doing this for a very long time as a brand strategist and a marketing leader. 20 years of experience. Don't let the baby face fool you. He's been around the block. And he also works with companies across various industries. He's helped numerous early stage companies establish their brand foundation and help them to guide them through some of their bigger challenges, like developing and executing their brand strategies, driving growth, and resonating with their audience, which as especially technical startup founders, you guys can really struggle with that. He's held many key positions at top agencies as well. I won't go through his entire bio of all of the great big companies he's helped, but he really did help those companies lead high impact branding initiatives and transform the way that they approach their brand identity. I find Benjamin's presentations very emotionally driven. I don't know if that's a fair way to talk about it, but not just emotionally driven, super practical. I think sometimes we think about storytelling as magic, and it is a little bit like magic, but there actually is some very practical approaches to that. And hopefully we'll cover some of that with you today, Benjamin. So go ahead and take it away.
Well, thank you, Arcelia. And yes, we will. And I think here with many of you are probably engineers or maybe not, maybe also some marketers and some branders. But yeah, there is an emotional side to it, but we don't want to, maybe that's a bad word. So we'll tackle that when we get there. But anyway, welcome everyone. Thank you very much for joining us. And yeah, we'll send these slides to you after. I'll probably do a simplified version just to be able to get them out on a PDF. But yeah, today we're talking about, the last time we talked about branding and mythology and some storytelling, which is still baked into all the great brands. It's not just feeds and speeds and look at our great company in terms of our technical prowess. You still need a story because people do like stories. But today we're going to focus on the what branding is for early stage companies, either a brand new, family and friends raising money, who knows what. We're making pies for the neighborhood, all the way through to maybe a growth stage company in the Series A or Series B, and how branding can, how I think you should think about branding and actually some practical ways to get it started in the right way. I'm going to admit some people too as I see them. Just a quick bio. Some of you may have seen the last presentation I did on branding. So business school at Stanford, and then I recently did some additional education in marketing and branding at Kellogg. My first half of my career was in management consulting, so straight ahead, places like Booz Allen, Accenture, Towers Perrin, now called Towers Watson. And then around halfway through my career, I got a big branding assignment. Actually, it was at Towers Watson. And I fell in love with branding because I felt as if many business strategies, whether they've been originated by company founders or recommended by the McKinseys and Bains and BCGs of the world for their clients, sometimes lose traction because they don't have a brand to help them bring that to life, to go to market with a brand. And it doesn't have to be, it doesn't always have to be a story like, or a cute character like Mickey Mouse or Winnie the Pooh, or some kind of mythological story like a knight in shining armor. But a story is any series of points in a linear path that makes sense and gains traction with audiences. And for all of you, I'm assuming that the first audience you need to attract and gain traction with is our investors. But after that, you still have a lot of work to do as well, and that's what we're going to talk about. So here's a couple of the roles I lived in Singapore for 2 different stints for a few years. Lived in London working for profit. I spent 6 months or so in Dubai. And since then, I've been on my own practicing in advising clients, but usually also working with other large management consulting firms, a lot of McKinsey, former partners, BCG, et cetera. And I love teaching and I love lecturing. So let me know if you would like to follow up on that. Here's my contact info. I'll put that up at the end, so don't feel like you have to rush to write it down now. So here's what we'll do today. The first thing we'll do is define what a brand is, or I think a useful way to think about a brand for an early stage company versus branding. So a brand is not branding. Those are 2 different concepts. And then also marketing. Marketing is its own separate practice and discipline, and we'll talk about the differences. I think there's a lot of confusion. People just sort of think that branding and marketing are the same. There is a little bit of overlap, but not as much as you might think. So we'll clarify that. There's some immutable truths about branding that I think apply to early stage companies, but also the kinds of companies I usually work with that are more developed. A lot of the work I do is rebranding, is a refresh of a branding of an established brand. But in fact, how I first came to Viterbi was through a brand new company, Butterfly Biosciences. I'm not sure if Alex, or I don't think Moses is joining, but there may be some other of the folks who are at Butterfly where we went through this process. But so there are branding truths that work for any stage company, but there are also stage dependent branding principles that I think apply to newer companies, and that's what we're going to walk through. How does branding create value and drive growth? Can it do that? What does a brand strategy look like? What are the elements that make it up? So is it a document? Is it a logo? Is it all of that? Mistakes to avoid. And then I have a bonus for you, a couple of nuances and potential traps that I'll tell you to how to avoid those. So the first question, right? You're an entrepreneur, or you're an early stage company, maybe a growth stage, maybe a little bit later. You just got funding, or you're working on that. You have all these things to worry about. Does my product fit? I need to build a team. I need to build a culture. I need a minimum viable product. With all of these things, why should I worry about branding? What value does it bring? In the short term, we'll talk about that it does provide traction for investors. A company with even a new brand has more value and has more memorability and more credibility. And then long term, there are multiplying effects of a brand that translate into dollars. So you can all of a sudden, 1.5 or 2x or 3x or more the value of your company when you tack on or have integrated a great brand. We'll talk about what you'll see some quotes from private equity. You'll see some quotes from consulting firms and CEOs about their experience with it. So should you invest in branding or not? Here with very limited capital and limited time, and if we are going to invest, how do we create the best? How do we get our brand set on a good foundation? So, what is a brand? This is how I think about it. For customers, it's the entire set of expectations and experiences that you've had with a company. So as soon as I say NVIDIA, you all of a sudden have a flood of associations with the name of that company, or Apple, and Google's a slightly different. It can, but also even practical brands like a Honda versus Toyota, they're close, but they're not exactly the same brand. What's the difference between Acura and BMW, or Acura and Mercedes? They're subtle, and believe me, there are many teams working on, for each of those companies, defining those brands. And that's the other side of a definition of a brand, is that for companies, a brand is the stated, created promise that you're making to the world, and then you have to fulfill that promise. One of the things about branding is that it can't help you if your iPhone doesn't work well, or your MacBook or your Honda. A brand is not going to save you from that. You need to have a good product and service, and you need to fulfill the promise that you're making. But if you can do that, a brand really helps accelerate your growth and your traction. Element, yeah, what we articulate, what we stand for, what's special about who we are, what is our purpose. But it includes what our visual design is, what is our look, what do we look like, and how do we sound like, verbal design. So tone of voice. Are we casual? Are we traditional? Are we conservative? And then branding is the process of researching and developing and articulating all the elements of a brand strategy. It's for a new brand. And if you already have a brand, or you're doing a refresh, what's called a brand refresh or a rebranding, that is re-articulating in a new, more relevant, more compelling way, a brand that's already in existence. So you have a brand, and then you have branding is a process, and that's what we'll be talking about doing. So I mentioned that there are truths about branding that apply no matter what. And the first thing is, I won't read sort of word by word, but I'll hit some of these. You already have a brand. Your company already has a brand, or even in your own mind. It's a question of whether you want to manage it or not. And once you start to raise funds, or gather a team, or buy a URL and start to sell products, or develop your product, you already have a brand. People have heard of you. People have an experience of you. They might know that you're a brand new company. They think you're cool, and part of your brand at these early stages is who you have, either yourself, your own personal brand, or perhaps some team members that or investors. And that, for an early stage company, that can matter. If you have somebody important or credible that's an investor, that's a part of your brand. And do you want to manage that, or are you just going to hope that it starts to serve your objectives well? Brands do create strategic value. They create strategic value and financial value. Not right away. So you're not going to all of a sudden, if you invest in a brand strategy, and whether you do it yourself or you have help, you're not going to all of a sudden on day 2 be worth 10x what you thought. But in a year, or a 2-year, or even in 6 months, you will be building strategic and financial value for your firm. As I mentioned, it can't solve, if you have a flawed business plan, or a flawed product or a service. It can't save you from that. It can buy you a little bit of forgiveness. If you think of Google, they call everything a beta at first, when they know it may not be perfect. You can do that too. But also they'll forgive your company if you have a misstep when you come out with your first product. If you have a good brand, it can give you some forgiveness. It won't give you permanent forgiveness, but it will help. Let's see. This is the last point I'll make on this slide, is that branding is not marketing. Branding is, as I mentioned, it's the process of setting your brand, your foundation, with a positioning statement, with brand pillars, with explaining your tone of voice, what makes you special, and articulating that so that not only all your team, but all your investors and all your storytelling that you do to raise funds or to grow your company is clear and compelling. Marketing is the process of getting those messages out to the right audiences at the right time. So, I see on LinkedIn all the time, I get a lot of notes from people saying, "Oh, I'm a marketing specialist. I'd love to work with you." And And I see branding specialists too, where they really what they're saying is they're going to do marketing for a company. So try to think of those two things as separate. Branding comes first, it's setting the foundation, and then marketing is getting those messages out. So here are the things that affect your brand strategy that you need to think about. This is why you can't just sort of one size fits all, step one to make a perfect brand for a pie making company versus Honda. It depends on how old your company is. Are you a week old? Or perhaps you're still, it's still an idea in your head. Are you 3 years and you're a Series B company, medical device company? Are you a professional services company that's 100 years old? All those things affect how you will present and articulate your brand. What industry are you in? Is it a crowded industry? It seems like most industries are crowded and competitive, but perhaps not. Perhaps you're starting a brand new category, so you don't have to worry about it, competitors yet. You might have to worry about copycats pretty soon after you start something, but all those things matter. How big is the market that you're in? Is it a small market? Is it a consumer market? Is it a B2B market? Is it a B2G market? Business strategy. Are you just going to pummel people with scale like Amazon or Progressive Insurance? Are you going to see a commercial every 2 minutes on the football game or on every channel seemingly? And people will get to know you just because out of repetition? Or are you marketing? Is your brand for a very specific set of buyers? A brand architecture is a term that means refers to how multiple brands in a portfolio relate to each other in your company. So if you're Microsoft, you have Microsoft Office. That's a part of your portfolio. And then within that, you have Microsoft Word, for example. And you can lay it out like almost like an org chart or an architecture chart where you show what are the family of brands, what are called sub brands, or sometimes it's called a flanking brand, or you have brands called an endorsement brand where you say, what is it? Courtyard by Marriott. So Marriott is the umbrella brand, but then you have brands that are endorsed. That's the word endorsement. Endorsed by Marriott, saying it's Courtyard by Marriott. Or in Harley Davidson, there's an electric motorcycle, I think it's called Livewire by Harley. So that's not, it actually, an endorsement brand puts a little space between the endorser and the endorsee, and you do that for very specific reasons. And brand architecture is how you lay that out and why or why not your brands are either related to each other by name, or perhaps they're separate. And the reason you would separate some brands is because you want to protect them from maybe risks that other brands have, or they have other special qualities to them that you want to separate. I think we'll just move through those. Yeah, the last thing is purchase drivers. What drives purchasing in your company for your product? Sometimes it's not a brand, right? If you just need milk, and even as I say that, maybe there are brands of milk that you like, Trader Joe's, and you won't get any other milk. But maybe there are certain brands that are generic, that are a commodity, and that's all right. You just want the lowest price, or you just want what's within arm's reach. But other times you want to have a brand, if it's a purse, a fashionable purse, or it's a car, or it's a neighborhood you're in, and it matters that you're in the Beverly Hills zip code. And so that's part of your brand, that you're a Beverly Hills company. But all those things need to, and I say reviews and rankings, those are a bigger, becoming still larger part of the reality of branding, because people do look at reviews and rankings. For example, the USC Viterbi brand, right? So people look at what the reviews are. They don't just look at the website, they look at what their experience has been. They'll talk with their friends, they'll talk with their colleagues. And so even USC Viterbi has a brand and can be managed. So here's a list of all of the aspects that I think that show how branding really adds tangible value to early stage companies. I won't walk through all of them, but it does. And I said the main one can sometimes be attracting investors. It does enhance perceptions of you. It does distill your promise into something quick and easy to say on an elevator. It drives awareness. It drives preference. If they've heard of your brand, they might try you before, a prospect might try you before someone else. And it also simplifies and it codifies and simplifies your decisions. If you know what you stand for, that makes it easier to choose which partners you'll choose, or which employees you'll hire or not, or what direction we should go. And we'll talk about in a minute how to pivot if in case your company needs to pivot. How do you do that while still maintaining your brand? Not always easy. Everything okay, Arcelia?
I have a question for the
Yes.
slide. It's almost like what comes first, right? With branding, how you were saying it's internal, and yet it has all of these external benefits. How much of that external aspect should you be using to inform the development of your brand, right? Or is it coming from the core and you are just looking for the external that works with what you are doing? What comes first, right? Or how much is
Great
that?
question.
Yeah.
It's a great question. And I would say the short answer is both. You should be, I think to do a great brand, you should not just look at yourselves, right? And let's talk about ourselves and we're going to go to Starbucks and talk about our great company with our 3 little founders. And aren't we so cool? I think you need to incorporate insights from the market, trends in the market, competitors in the market, competitors' brands in the market, if there are any, at the same time. That's what I've loved about branding. It's difficult, but you need to solve for those as best you can while also capturing your own vision. One of the things that brands do, unfortunately, by mistake, is they say that, well, we have to be different. Our company has to be different, right? We're doing XYZ product or XYZ service. We need to be different than the other ones. Well, the trouble with that, when you make it too simple, is that you might be different in a way that doesn't matter to your prospects and customers, and you have a wild logo, you have a wild tagline, you have a cool different, you look totally different. If you're in a conservative industry, you look young and wild and hip. Or you're in a you're going for young people, but you are very much more conservative kind of brand, and you think that's cool because you'll stand out. The trouble with it is that you forgot to realize that your brand needs to land on them, and it needs to speak to them in some way to say, we're a brand for you. And if you're too wild or you haven't thought through it enough, you're in danger of missing that mark. Here's I put this chart up here. This is from Ocean Tomo, it's an investment bank advisory consulting firm. But you can see here that the 90-10, I circled that because 90% of the value of the S&P 500 is intangible assets, right? And brand is usually the biggest one of those. IP is another, but often brand is a large part of that 90%. That's value. That is tangible value in the S&P. So I want you to remember that this is not just pretty colors and a clever tagline and even a beautiful positioning statement. This turns into money and stock price as you grow. Companies know this. These are 2 of the top. So I used to work for Interbrand. It's probably the largest and best known branding agency. And I've continued to work with them even on my own, and I may even consider rejoining them. They're a great firm. There are obviously other firms too. Each year they come out with the top global brands study, which is 100 of the top most valuable brands. I won't go through these obviously one at a time. I think NVIDIA now here was ranked 36, but I think it's much higher now. This is a couple months old. But this is the brand value. This is not the value of the company. These are just the brand of the Coke brand or the Apple brand. So when you show this to, CEOs and boards and investors and private equity, understand this, and and they're looking at these rankings, and these are, this is in the, Apple here. I think there's, and I mentioned this other one too. This is, let me go back. This is Brand Finance is another branding firm. They have their own ranking. The numbers are slightly different. I put them both up just so you see that it's not maybe the exact number on any one ranking, but people are paying attention to these rankings, and they are, as I mentioned, it's just the sheer brand value, not all the rest of EBITDA and future value of earnings and all that. This is strictly the financial value of brand. So this is quite real. Here's a quote from a private equity partner, that EBITDA, which is what most investors and private equity and venture capital focus on, that when you focus on that, you do bring incremental results. But when you focus on brands and intangibles, and I have another quote here from another big investor that we've all heard of, that he talks about, it's really the brand and intangibles that has made him wealthy. And when I say wealthy, I mean in the hundreds of billions. So in recent years, there's just a sub point here that private equity firms are starting to realize that they need to look beyond EBITDA. Many of them still only focus on EBITDA. I think to their regret. But they're starting to understand the power of brands to generate potential multiples and certainly a nice shine that helps them on an exit or in M&A. I showed this last time. This is Steve Jobs. I hope you can see this. Let me know in the chat, or maybe if Arcelia can let me know if you can't hear it. I'm going to play it and see if it works. This is Steve Jobs at an internal meeting back in '97. You'll see he's wearing shorts and flip-flops. But it shows you that he had figured this out, and this is right before, in the late '90s. This is prior to Apple's dominance, and I think their brand, standing for basically that creative people can change the world. That's a brand position. They owned it first, and I think it was one of the key dimensions that propelled the Apple brand to where it is today.
To me,
can you hear that?
Yep.
It's about values. This is a very complicated world. It's a very noisy world. And we're not going to get a chance to get people to remember much about us. No company is. And so we have to be really clear on what we want them to know about us. Now, Apple, fortunately, is one of the half a dozen best brands in the whole world, right up there with Nike, Disney, Coke, Sony. It is one of the greats of the greats, not just in this country, but all around the globe. And but even a great brand needs investment and caring if it's going to retain its relevance and vitality. And the Apple brand has clearly suffered from neglect in this area in the last few years. And we need to bring it back. The way to do that is not to talk about speeds and feeds.
So just make sure you heard that. Not to talk about speeds and feeds. So not to talk about, oh, look how fast our chip is. Look how cool our resolution is, right? So if you're NVIDIA, to not talk about that. So just make sure you heard that. So that's not the answer.
It's not to talk about MIPS and megahertz. It's not to talk about why we're better than Windows. The dairy industry tried for 20 years to convince you that milk was good for you. It's a lie, but they tried anyway. And the sales were going like this. And then they tried Got Milk, and the sales have gone like this. Got Milk doesn't even talk about the product. Matter of fact, it focuses on the absence of the product. But the best example of all, and one of the greatest jobs of marketing the universe has ever seen is Nike. Remember, Nike sells a commodity. They sell shoes. And yet, when you think of Nike, you feel something different than a shoe company. In their ads, as you know, they don't ever talk about the products. They don't ever tell you about their air soles and why they're better than Reebok's air soles. What does Nike do in their advertising? They honor great athletes and they honor great athletics. That's who they are. That's what they are about. Apple spends a fortune on advertising. You'd never know it. You'd never know it. So when I got here, Apple just fired their agency. We're doing a competition with 23 agencies that, 4 years from now would have picked one. And we blew that up, and we hired Chiat, the ad agency that I was fortunate enough to work with years ago. We created some award-winning work, including the commercial voted the best ad ever made in 1984 by advertising professionals. And we started working about 8 weeks ago. And the question we asked was, our customers want to know who is Apple and what is it that we stand for? Where do we fit in this world? And what we're about isn't making boxes for people to get their jobs done, although we do that well. We do that better than almost anybody in some cases. But Apple's about something more than that. Apple, at the core, its core value is that we believe that people with passion can change the world for the better. That's what we believe. And we've had the opportunity to work with people like that. We've had an opportunity to work with people like you, with software developers, with customers who have done it in some big and some small ways. And we believe that in this world, people can change it for the better. And that those people that are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones that actually do. And so what we're going to do in our first brand marketing campaign in several years is to get back to that core value. A lot of things have changed. The market's a totally different place than it was a decade ago. And Apple's totally different, and Apple's place in it is totally different. And believe me, the products and the distribution strategy and the manufacturing are totally different, and we understand that. But values and core values, those things shouldn't change. The things that Apple believed in at its core are the same things that Apple really stands for today. And so we wanted to find a way to communicate this. And what we have is something that I'm very moved by. It honors those people who have changed the world. Some of them are living, some of them are not. But the ones that aren't, as you'll see, you know that if they ever used a computer, it would have been a Mac. And
let's pause it there. It kills me to even pause it. But anyway, he ends up showing this, what you may have all seen, the second probably most famous and most awarded commercial ever was the one with, it shows Einstein, it shows Amelia Earhart, it shows people who changed the world. But sorry, go ahead.
Before you play it again, Benjamin, it's not that I can't hear it. It's just very low. I'm not sure if there's a way to increase your volume, but at the very least, maybe you can turn on the closed captioning in the video.
Yeah, I think we'll hold off on playing it from here. So we'll just keep moving on. Sorry, I couldn't hear it.
No, but it was just low. That's
okay. But it shows you, to me, what it shows is that he, among many other things, he was a leader who knew about that sort of that level of a brand that moves us. And it's not the only level of a brand, but as I said, you still have to have speeds and feeds. You still have to have a box that works. You still have to have an iPhone that works. You still have to have customer service. But when you have this level of humanity and meaning, that you stand for something, I think that's what propelled, part of what propelled and differentiated Apple from Microsoft at the time. Here's just a reference that Arcelia had mentioned, and I mentioned briefly, is this is the presentation I did last time for Viterbi, where we talked about this level of mythology and storytelling and humanity. We won't go into too much of it now, but and as I mentioned, there are many other sort of higher levels to a brand that need to be baked in. But I believe that a really great brand, and there's no reason even a new company can't build this into your brand, for your own, for your employees, for your leadership, for your, what do you believe, and why does it matter? And you can get your customers believing that too, even if you're brand new or an investor. So we can send those out again if you wanted to take a look at sort of a deeper dive into the mythology. Joseph Campbell, the mythologist, and Carl Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist, talk about why stories matter to us, and how branding can take advantage of that.
Yeah, I dropped those videos in the chat during the Steve Jobs video. I also just wanted to take a moment to say how inspiring it is to think about how beliefs really kind of have a trickle-down effect. Obviously, when it comes to branding, the big thing that people think about is how your company appears, right? How it appears to the world, which informs their expectations about you. But kind of more of the, I think, benefits is that it really does infiltrate the operations of the organization, which I think takes a lot of the kind of challenging nature of operations and simplifies it, because now you're working within a framework that you can always depend on. It helps the way that you talk about it. It helps the way that you have meetings about it. It helps the way that you hire about it. And so that kind of belief system has it's tendrils in all of these really important elements. But for me personally, I love how it infiltrates operations.
It's a great point. It simplifies and clarifies for the executive team, for your first employee, for your hundreds of employees. So I put a list here. I won't walk through each individually, but these insights and aspects of and thinking that I think are required to do a great brand strategy, to build a great brand strategy. And to Arcelia's question before, do we just look internally and figure out what we want to stand for, or do we also look at the external world? My view is that I think it's important to look at the external world and let that inform, or perhaps tune your brand for maximum impact. The center of your brand is still your own vision, but it still can be, there's no reason it can't be tuned and refined and tweaked to the market that you're serving, to the world that you're in, to the current world as we know it. I won't walk through these too carefully, but you need to have your business strategy articulated. It's one of the first things I ask for when I start an engagement. Oh, great. And they say, well, we have a business strategy. And I say, great. Can I see it? Oh, well, I'm not sure we have it here, or we have an earlier version of it, or we'll get that to you. And so usually the first stage is all of us, usually the executive team, walking through and maybe refining and articulating for the first time what our business strategy is. And now we have that to then bring that to life with our brand. But we have to first know what our offerings are, who should buy from us, and why. But then, a lot of the work that I end up doing is I talk to customers, a lot of lost customers, a lot of prospects, people who don't know you, What do they think of you? What category are you in? Is it a fast moving? Are there incumbents? Are you Hertz and you're trying to go after, are you Avis and there's Hertz, the big gorilla in the market, and you're trying to take them down? That would mean a slightly different brand. I put here the 4 C's. So at Bain, I've done some work with Bain folks for their clients, and there's the 3 C's: company, customer, and competition. But there's also the 4th. I would call it the category. Sometimes your category has its own brand advantages or brand liabilities. People think that banking is boring, let's say, and you're a bank brand, or people think you're cool. You have an iPhone, and or you have a Samsung, which I had for a while, and people don't think you're cool because you're on Android. I'm not. I don't have a dog in that race. I'm just saying that you maybe not by brand like that, but you may have built-in advantages or disadvantages that you can address with your company brand. So all these things need to be taken care of, or sort of taken into account. It's the reason it usually takes a while. And then here I've made a list of the actual documents, the actual outputs, if someone said, show me your brand strategy, this is what it looks like. A summary of the research you've done. What are your core statements? Core statements are your vision, your purpose statement, and your mission statement. McKinsey did a deep dive on how many of those statements do you need to have? Why not just have one vision statement? Do we need to have a mission statement as well? They ended up, I think they talked to 400 CEOs and they ended up recommending 3. So that's what I go with, but those can be tweaked. What's a brand pillar? What are your values and why? You don't have to write a novel about them, but if you say, well, we're collaborative, or we're creative, or we're inclusive. Well, what do you mean by that? What does your company mean by that? What is your brand personality? What is a positioning statement is here in bold, because a positioning statement is usually it's not just a one sentence. It is a carefully crafted, meant to be almost eternal, as about as eternal as we can think of it, 15 years, right? That stands for what we believe. In that Steve Jobs case, it would be, we believe people with passion can change the world, and that people who are crazy enough to think that they can change the world are the ones who usually do. Those 3 or 4 sentences would be in there, but there would be a little bit more. And I've written them for clients where it's a page long. I've written it where it's been a paragraph. And you need to have all your executives, when you're reading it, and this is always the exciting and sometimes nervous time for when I'm working with clients, is when I'm first reading them their new brand positioning statement. And there's 400 vice chairmen sitting there, and they haven't seen it before, and they need to be nodding and saying, that's who we are. You've captured it, or the team, or whoever is working. And then once you have that positioning articulated, now you go to the design phase. Although sometimes I bring designers in early because I want to hear their thoughts, but now you design it. So most people they want a logo for their website, they want a logo for their business card, and they go right to a logo because their sister knows Photoshop, and their sister's or their brother, their cousin knows CapCut. And so we're going to make a cool logo for my friend's company. So you're jumping ahead there, and you at least want it to tie back in meaningful ways to what your positioning is. And if for those of you that have multiple brands, you want to have your brand architecture figured out. Do you have 3 separate services? Do you have a device? Are you a medical device company and you have a portfolio, a suite of devices, and then you have services, and then you have diagnostics? Are they going to have different brand names? You need to figure that out. I do brand books for people a lot. It's a great way to publish. It doesn't have to be very expensive, but it's a great thing to hand out, and it can really capture your brand. I'll just show you a couple examples of it. This left side shows those are all spreads there. So that's it. Those are they're shown in small size because this is an entire presentation. This is I think it was 80 pages of very, very detailed, high resolution design presentation, looking at all the competitors in this space. This is, I worked on the spinning brand, if you guys know spinning classes, so indoor cycling. And the spinning brand is a worldwide brand. It's the leading brand in the space, but they were rebranding and needed a lot of help and work. That's just the design presentation. On the right, this is some spreads from about, it was 12-page brand book that we did for them. It's, you know, it's a beautiful piece. They handed out, it was an incredible thing for the entire company to work on. As I said, you can do a quick version of it. It doesn't have to be complicated or expensive, but it's a great way to encapsulate a public presentation of your brand. Last couple slides, and then I'd love to open it up for questions. These are common mistakes. Building your brand on something that can be copied pretty easily or surpassed. When I was in Dubai, I was working for a very wealthy family who was building a part of the city of Dubai, and they had some very striking buildings and exciting features of that development, and including what was going to be at that time the tallest building in Dubai. And they were excited about the tall building, as they should be. But you shouldn't build your brand on the tallest building. Why? There'll be a taller building next year. And if your brand is built on that, you are going to have a little trouble. It's not the end of the world, but you want to. So I had to move them to think about what else that matters to you, just besides, for example, the height of a building, or the speed of a chip, or something else that's easily surpassed or duplicated. How consistent are you across your brand, your website, your statements, your business cards, your presentations, your tone? As I mentioned, being different, but not in a way that matters to your audiences. Don't just be different. Make sure that the way you're different is in a way that is meaningful. And then I think a mistake to make is to sort of neglect your brand and just pretend that it, or ignore the reality that you already have a brand, and that you can choose to manage it. Even if you do it minimally, you'll be much better off. Yeah, you already have a brand, so it's just a question of whether you want to manage it or not. And the last slide here is possible traps. So OpenAI, for example, I don't know if you followed them to a certain point, but I remember they had a strong brand pillar of being a nonprofit. And they were doing this for the good of the world, which it is good for the good of the world. And then they recently changed that. And I don't know exactly what the latest, today or yesterday, but recently they changed from being not a nonprofit to being for profit. That is, if that's one of your brand pillars, that is going to shake your brand up a little bit. It may not ruin your brand, and OpenAI has a very strong brand, but you want to try to make sure that you are as authentic as you can to where you will be in the future. And it's not always easy, as we see with OpenAI, to hold on to those things. The aspiration they had to be a nonprofit, they ended up not being able to do it. As I said, there's a way. If I was working with them, there are ways to solve that and minimize the challenge with it and maximize the opportunity with it. But it's an issue now. The last issue here is pivoting. How do you pivot as a company? And I mentioned Butterfly Biosciences, which I worked with Moses and Alex and the other founders, and they're close friends with USC Viterbi, and we've had some pivots in our company, and so we've navigated those pivots. Luckily, we built the brand on Butterfly's brand on principles that transcend whether you're a device company or even a diagnostics company or a services company. And I believe in doing that. And in that case, there was a pivot that we sort of been working through the last maybe 4 to 5 months that has worked because we didn't have to change the brand. It still fit within so a company, for example, like Harley, and I put here some other examples of brands that have struggled to keep up with the times as trends change, as tastes change, as populations change with their brand. So the Harley Davidson I mentioned a lot because it had a very strong brand. I think it's still quite strong, but it's having trouble with traction with particularly women riders and younger riders, and riders of color. And so how do they do that? And also going electric, which is where a lot of the market is going. So Harley Davidson is big twin engines, right? Gas, internal combustion engines. If you're Harley Davidson, how do you go into this new world? One way, as I mentioned, is they have a separate brand called Livewire, which is their electric bike. And it says Livewire by Harley Davidson. So that's a way of distancing yourself a little bit from the older, you could say, the more traditional Harley Davidson brand and expectation of big engines, and still be able to keep up in the modern world with having a cool electric bike. So Livewire is the main brand there. That's just one example. So just a quick review. We talked about brand versus branding and versus marketing. Immutable truths versus what matters to your specific early stage companies. Where branding creates value, why bother with it? Why invest now, or take a little bit of what your limited capital invest in it, or at least focus your attention on it, even if you don't have much capital. What are the brand platform elements? What exactly is in there and what needs to be in there, including researching what research you do in the world, as well as encapsulating what the vision of your company, mistakes, and then possible traps. The last thing I'll just mention here is that fractional services in either marketing and now branding are becoming extremely popular. And I am going to be offering my own sort of version of that, and there's not much out there yet. So I'm a new brand myself in this way, where I will be sort of an acting fractional chief brand officer for companies. Most of the companies I work with are middle, small and medium size, well-established brands. But I wanted to explore and offer, and you're having the sneak peek here. You're seeing it first. And I know engineers appreciate a good deal like anybody. But this is a way that myself and I think others will join in, including agencies, will offer branding services in a fractional way. And when I say fractional, I mean, that it's limited and tailored services for whatever is needed, nothing extra, but also that it's at a fraction of the usual cost. So you're getting Interbrand and BCG and McKinsey for pennies on the dollar, we hope. So watch for that. So that's the website, chiefbrandofficer.services, and watch for that starting next month. So that's my contact info, and please let me know if we have maybe at least a few minutes for questions, and I'm available after this if there's follow-up that you want to send an email or chat.
Yeah. Also, LinkedIn is becoming such a powerful connector, and social media site. It's really evolved over the kind of digital business card that it used to serve as. So by all means, connect with Benjamin on LinkedIn as well. But is there any questions from the group? I mean, this is, like I said, such a stated element in early stage startups, especially when we're talking about tech startups where the founders are engineers. They couldn't be further away from thinking about this concept of beliefs. And so I know that this is a super valuable and, like I said, practical way of breaking down that kind of experience in a way that could be managed by even someone who doesn't come from this background. I noticed that Kagan just came on camera. Do you have a question, Kagan?
Yeah, actually, but please move on. I can explain.
Was that yes or no? I'm sorry, I missed that.
Yeah, I have a question, but you are also talking.
No, please, I'm passing it.
Okay. Could you go? Firstly, Benjamin, thank you very much for your presentation. It's very good for branding, brand and branding differences. Could you go to the ninth slide? Ninth one.
All right. This would be magic if I can. The ninth slide. I like it. Very specific. I think I have it here.
Yeah. I mean, I cannot understand how it's possible if the
Oh.
brand doesn't. No, okay.
I'll go back to it. This one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, how the brand can make money without gets value without an tangible essence?
Brands are intangible, right? They're an intangible asset, just like intellectual property, your patents, your software, so the way that they value them, the way that you get a actual value to them is there's a few ways to value it. One is the future value of having a brand. If you're an orange company, you make oranges, and you have Sunkissed, your brand is Sunkissed, but you have another company that doesn't have Sunkissed, you can bet that Sunkissed is having that brand is going to drive X amount of more revenues in the future, right? More than a generic orange company. So then the Sunkissed brand is the present value, the current value of all those future estimated, but they're future earnings that are extra on top of the regular orange sales, right? So you can calculate what are those earnings, estimating with some assumptions, and you calculate, well, what's that worth now? So if I was going to sell my Sunkissed company, you're going to have to pay for my factory, you're going to have to pay for my staff, you're going to have to pay for my access to providers, but you're also going to have to pay for the brand, because the brand is on top of that, is driving all these more future earnings, right? Through the end of time. So it's a front-loaded, a front calculated assumption and calculation. As I saw, this is where you get these rankings from. On this slide, the next slide, which is the reason that Apple has I think it's $500 billion for just the brand, is that if the Apple sold their brand to someone else, that's a current representation of all of the future earnings that the Apple brand will drive for you.
I see. Okay, because in my company, I was working on the valuations, and we just focus on the number of the units, number of the sale of our product. So I mean, we were thinking about selling $8,000 product, and we were to say, okay, then our valuation will be about according to this one. But I think maybe we can use some other things.
Well, yeah, I like your question, if I may, which is that you say, well, yeah, we want to sell this much, right? These many, and so therefore, this is our valuation, this is our multiple, you could say. But and it might be a stretch if you're a brand new company to say, well, because we have a cool brand that, but we haven't sold anything yet. I'm not sure. You don't have to tell me now what stage you're in, but let's say you haven't sold anything yet, or just brand new. It might be hard to persuade someone to pay you 5x or 7x today, but I'm telling you, but the brand will still help you attract investors and grow for the next 3 months. And then you can start to say, yeah, and we have a nice brand. So in addition to the nice emotional feel that and recognition that maybe your potential buyers would have, you can, I think, as the months go, 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, your brand can be more and more of a separate line item that adds to your valuation.
I see. I mean, it's a little bit tough one because it's about the medical devices, especially for the heart pumps. So we have a lot of regulations, so we cannot sell it like about within 3 years.
Yeah,
So
that's
we are working on it, but thanks a
it's
lot.
tricky. Okay. Any other comments, dreams, hopes, criticisms?
I feel like it's not very useful for startups because startups are so MVP focused. They do not have a portfolio yet of products or programs that they are managing yet. But for my own work at the university, I think about this all the time. And I wonder if there is value in at an early stage kind of thinking about that when startups are evaluating use cases, or sometimes they want to try a different customer segment, right? Which might require them to go back to their branding and think about that again. It's like, I guess one of the things that is kind of maybe we didn't talk about, but is on my mind is, how much, what is it, like agility or continuous improvement should be involved in branding? Is that a slippery slope? Is there a point where like the conversation needs to be closed, at least for a period of time, to see how it works? Like there's all of these elements that I think that make it a little challenging. I don't know.
That's right.
And
That's right.
how often to reevaluate? Like, is there a cadence? Like, should it be annual? Should it be quarterly? Should it, you know what I mean?
Right. And if you're constantly tinkering with it, right,
Right.
that's not necessarily bad, right? But like Apple does not tinker with, we stand for the company, for people with passion for the world can change it, and the people who are crazy, right? That has not changed. Or the Harley, I would call Harley would be, they stand for, I would say, American independence and rebellion and bold. There's a boldness, right? And including loud engines, at least for the gas ones, which is a problem when it comes to the electric one. Like, are you a Harley? Are you actually a Harley when you're quiet with an electric bike? But those things are eternal, as you say. Like, well, what's eternal and what's oh darn? We just found out, like with Butterfly Biosciences, we found out that, which is also medical devices, Kagan. We found out that it looked like the diagnostics piece of the business was going to be all of a sudden at the front of the first offering. We thought we were going to do the device first, and then turns out that a sort of an ancillary or a secondary or a subsequent business, which is diagnostics, looks like that's becoming much more upfront. But what we stand for doesn't change, and sometimes companies need a little help. It doesn't even need to be long. It could be half a day with a little help and or just focusing on it, and we can get it. I mean, it took us longer than a half a day, but because I had to wrangle doctors. Doctors. I mean, they're almost like engineers or branding people. They're very tough to wrangle. But anyway, yes, you're right. Even if you have a new portfolio or you think of a new business, but then when you think of a new part of your business that you didn't think of at the start, how does it relate? Should it be part of us? Should it be, new co from Harley, or should it be a separate company or a sub-brand like Microsoft Office, Microsoft Word, Butterfly Device, Butterfly Services? So you just need a little help figuring that out and articulating it. That's it. It can be done. And yes, over tweaking is a problem, but more often the problem is we don't need a brand yet. We don't need a brand until Series B, because we have I like my name, and my friend knows Photoshop, and he's going to make a cute little logo for us, and that's all we need for now. And I respectfully submit and invite you to consider that the earlier you start, the better you'll be, the more value it will give you. Maybe not on day 2, but starting day 30, day 90, 1 year.
Yeah. And again, kind of going back to this operational element, while your early stage teams are doing their first major hires, these people are their evangelists. If you don't understand your position in the world, then you're going to have a lot of difficult time, you know, weeding through new relationships, because you have, you know, the North Star is not so clear ahead. So yeah.
Especially for early, because you're often asked all the time in an elevator, at an investor conference, at the USC presentations for, you know, pitching investors. So we'll do elevator statements. I'll write them for them, like, here, and they all like, I got it, I love it. And then you take away the variability of what someone might say to an investor that they run into at Trader Joe's.
Yeah.
And they say, oh, what do you do? Oh, we
Yeah.
have an early stage company. Oh, what? Oh, in what?
Yeah.
That's the what I want to say is that's the end product of a good brand strategy, is that you also have a nice elevator statement, or a short or even a tagline, even one sentence one that everyone can remember, so that you do what you can to be consistent and compelling.
Yeah. And you know, just to kind of dovetail into the wrap up, I feel like a good portion of how you develop that, right, was in your first two presentations, when you're really thinking about who you are, you know, that kind of great understanding of the character of the company, right? And so I encourage everybody to watch those videos.
Even though it's not engineering, I know, and I get it. And it's not wrong or right, because, you know, I'll just say for the last thing is that, you know, you have these two different worlds. Like, I'll have the chief information officer will come into the branding meeting, and they, you know, they don't like it. They don't think it's important. And then the marketing people, they don't quite maybe understand the technical side, or they maybe write it off. Part of this is bringing people of all the different mindsets and job roles together. And it doesn't have to be a religion in a way. It's just clarity and appreciation. That's it. So.
Yeah. Well, I think now that we're almost 10 minutes over, I want to respect your time. Benjamin has been with us, like I said, for several talks, and I will get him again. Mark my words.
I'm ready.
But please continue to connect with him. Like he mentioned.
Yeah, LinkedIn. I saw some LinkedIn already, and yeah, so please.
Amazing. And you know, thank you for supporting the teams at the garage. You know, like Butterfly Bio is one, but I know that you've connected with several before, and so
I have.
We've just really appreciated this. You know, like I said, completely undervalued, or maybe not undervalued, but under appreciated element of the development of a business that I think people really do need to be thinking about early, for no reason other than it just gives them direction. And direction is, like, in the beginning stages of startup world, it's priceless. And so yeah. Thank you so much. And hopefully I'll see you all for our next Oceanside chat. I think it's in 2 weeks, and it's on SBIR funding, which I know is also a big deal for some of our technical founders. Thanks, Benjamin.
Thanks, everyone. Really appreciate it.